Good evening, Internet. This is CFS Eurovision here, and welcome to another video. Last week's video was about the advice I gave to each participating country before the national final season began. Of course, as I'm only covering national finals and not the main contest, last week I looked specifically at the advice that I'd given to the 25 national final countries. Well, 24 for obvious reasons, and determined whether or not they had followed that advice and whether the national finals were better or worse for doing so. In this week's video, I will be giving new advice to the 24 countries for what they can do next year to improve their national finals, or indeed if they need to do anything at all. So let's go. Albania. Sort the semi-final format out. The level of quality Festivali I Këngës provides has improved massively since Elhajde Dani took charge. But there's still one shadow that looms over the overall process of selecting the winner and Eurovision act. That is the semi-finals. In 2026, 28 acts entered Festivali I Këngës and were separated into the two semi-finals. Each semi-final had 14 acts, 9 of which in each semi were already pre-qualified for the final, and therefore 5 newcomers, as they're known, had to go through the jury voting. 5 in total out of the 10 newcomers went through to the final, though that can be split across any number between each of the semis. This is just a weirdly complicated format, especially when you consider that the closest thing to Festivali I Këngës in a Eurovision context is Sanremo in Italy, where all the acts make it to the final day. So either do that or have normal semi-finals like the other countries. Please, there's no need for that format the way it is. Austria. Go back to internal selections. When I made last year's version of this video, I wasn't expecting Austria to switch to a national selection show in 2026. After all, they hadn't done so since 2016. But instead, they decided to go with this Wer singt für Österreich format. Wer singt für Österreich translates to Who Sings for Austria, by the way. Frankly, the level of quality was appalling and kind of unacceptable, in my opinion, for the country that won last year. This is compounded by the fact that the winner and their entry, Cosmo with Tanshine, has the second lowest rating on Eurovision World out of that entire national final. And if you look at the model, shout out James from ESC Insight by the way, Austria is set to finish dead last in the final that they have auto-qualified for as hosts. Yikes. So yeah, the national final game isn't for you, Austria. Go back. Bulgaria. I'm saying it again, but do an internal selection. Bulgaria are a returning country to Eurovision 2026 after 3 years out. They decided on their return to do a national selection show, Nacionalna Selekcja. This consisted of 2 shows, a semi-final and a final, that were used to select the artist Dara. Then a 3rd show would happen, where Dara would perform 3 songs, and the winning song would be her entry for Eurovision. Bulgaria last did a national selection in 2013, and it showed. The format was convoluted and unnecessary. The 15 artists that entered were allegedly invited by BNT based on the amount of streams, downloads and sales. But to my eyes, surely some of the artists that were actually top of that list were unavailable, because otherwise I can't explain how none of them were recognisable. Add to all of this that the financial pressure will gradually keep returning with every subsequent year they spend in the competition, and I just don't think Bulgaria is in a position to keep investing in a national final. So my advice is do an internal selection next year. Croatia. You don't need 4 hosts. Croatia's national final, Dora, is one that has improved in recent years as a result of letting interesting and innovative entries into the competition, learning from the mistake they made by initially only putting Baby Lasagna as second reserve. This year's was a good example of that. The format is also something that I've never felt has to be changed either, so there aren't many areas in which I can find advice to give. But there is one, which is the number of hosts. Both semi-finals and the final were all hosted by Barbara Kolar, Dusko Čerlić, Ivan Vukušić, and Iva Sulentic. 4 people, even in the semi-finals. That is too many people. You are only introducing 12 acts in the semi-finals and 16 in the final. There is no need to be having 4 hosts. Denmark. Whatever you changed in 2026, do it again for 2027. Denmark's national final was much better in 2026. The improvement was night and day with regards to quality of entry, and they selected the right song, and in a native language to boot. This was after years in the wilderness, having not qualified for the final in the 2020s up until 2025. There was something that DR must have changed for this year in the processes that was different in 2025 and years previous. And whatever it was, they must keep it that way for 2027. There's still a lot that can be improved, change the super final a bit, as it's the exact same as the regular final for one, but the current improvement does need to be maintained. Estonia. Choose something that isn't awful next time. Estonia's national final format does not need to change, and the overall quality of the competing entries in it is more than good enough. The production is great as well. Estonia look like they are vaguely heading in the direction of another Eurovision win if they continue on this trajectory. However, this year they shouldn't be anywhere close to even qualifying for the main contest's final. They chose horribly wrong. And whilst that is partially on the Estonian public and not the broadcaster, they do have control in some way with ensuring that the juries make sure that songs like this can't be chosen even if the public want it. Finland. If you win, focus on hosting. If you lose, focus on how you can win next time. I'm fairly convinced that Finland is the country that has the best chance of winning the 2026 Eurovision Song Contest. Uden Musiikin Kilpailu is by far the best national final out there. They have an arena and the level of production there ready and waiting for when they host. And it is a matter of when, not if. It's surely now just a matter of time before they win the main contest. If they do win this year, then the one issue they have is that they haven't hosted since 2007. Which will be 20 years by the time they do host. As such, there's a significant difference in what the contest looks like since the last time they hosted, and they will need to be ready with the right personalities for the 2020s contests. However, there is of course the scenario where they lose, which will hit them hard like it did after Käärijä in 2023. What they'll need to do is learn the right lessons and not make wholesale changes from where they are now, because, as I said, it's only a matter of time before they do win. If they make sweeping changes after that, they may never win this contest again. So they will need to hold their nerve in that scenario. Germany. Just get rid of it. I admire Germany's courage in flat out refusing to learn the lessons of the past with regards to their Eurovision National Final. The 2025 format was terrible and undemocratic, with the public not being involved for 3.5 of the 4 shows, and the jury basically being given all the power until then. This led to fan favourites Feuerschwanz not even being eligible for the public vote. It was so frustrating. In 2026, the format was slightly different with 1 show. However, the jury once again had full control until the top 3 were decided, and then the public chose the winner. This simply isn't enough of a change, nowhere near it in fact, and under a different broadcaster as well. There is simply no excuse, so here's the ultimatum, Germany. Change the national final so the public have input at every stage, even if it's 50-50 the whole way through, or get rid of it entirely and do an internal selection. Greece. Bridge the quality gap. In this bit of advice, the quality gap refers to the changes that were made between 2025 and 2026, whereby Ethnikos Telekos expanded into the new Song for Greece format involving semi-finals. This was a good change in principle. However, the implementation was slightly difficult in terms of quality. The increase in number of entries from 12 to 28 felt more like ERT were bringing in 16 songs that they'd have rejected the previous year than 16 fresh, interesting entries. They need to be very careful to avoid that. What they do have going for them in this regard is the fact that more artists will be aware of the higher amount of places, and so the talent pool will likely be bigger overall in 2027 anyway, so this one may well happen naturally, and I wish them good luck in this. It's everyone's favourite part of the video, the brief interlude. This is where I say that you're not subscribed, and that you should be subscribed, but you never actually follow the instructions. It's free, with no catch. There's no reason not to, just click the button. That's all I'm asking you to do. Thank you. Italy. Maintain a closer relationship with Eurovision-related fan media. James Stevenson of ESC Insight, who created and still develops the model, which is a projection of the result of Eurovision at various stages of the season, was given press accreditation for Sanremo 2026. He's been one of very few people to actually have been given press accreditation coming from a specifically Eurovision-related fan media space, whereas Sanremo's press accreditation usually is prioritized for Italian-based media outlets. Sanremo is of course not a national final, and participation in Eurovision is strictly optional for the winner. However, it would seem that Italy in recent years has been slightly more inclined to bridge that gap between Sanremo and the main contest. After all, the winner has chosen to go to Eurovision every time bar one since 2017, so it's clear that the relationship is closer than the setup may suggest. If this trend is to continue, I'd like to see more Eurovision fan media being given accreditation for Sanremo next year. Latvia. Whatever you did, keep doing it. It's fair to say Latvia is among the countries I was most surprisingly impressed by in 2026. There was something for everyone in that national final, and every song was of a strong standard. The staging was also incredible for most entries, and everyone really did have the opportunity to shine on that stage in Riga. This is a pleasant surprise coming from a country that, until 2024, had a non-qualification streak of 6 and a record of 12 non-qualifications in 14 years. Supernova has become a national final I want to seek out in the calendar at long last. And so, whatever changed in the last few years, because it's been a gradual improvement, not entirely a sudden one, keep going. This is looking very good, Latvia. Lithuania. Do what I said last year. Less variety, more quality. It's very clear that Lithuania did not listen to my advice of balancing out the admittedly impressive level of variety in Eurovisia.lt with an increased level of quality. It did feel very much the same competition that we've come to know in recent years, where 40 songs enter and about 30 of them don't measure up to the other 10. I want Lithuania to do well at the main contest, but it feels like this national final requires another change for it to become the best it can be. Luxembourg. Replace all of the producers that selected the acts of Luxembourg Song Contest. Luxembourg Song Contest, over the last 3 years since Luxembourg's return, has shown a surprising lack of quality of entry, especially when compared to the show's very clear higher budget. One would have thought, due to the unique nature of Luxembourg as a country in Eurovision, being a very recent returnee, and remaining one of just 2 countries in the contest with a 100% final qualification rate, the other being Ukraine, that it would be a national final many acts would be eager to compete in. Instead, there's either a lack of trust or a lack of good judgment. A lack of trust is slightly understandable given the controversy in 2024, when the artists were basically judged before the contest on vocal talent, and then given Sweden's hand-me-downs to perform as their actual entry. it does seem we've moved on from that now. So it strikes me that the producers who choose which artists and which songs make the Luxembourg Song Contest don't really have an idea of what works for the main contest. And if Luxembourg wants to do well at the main contest, that's a very concerning thing. Malta switched the MESC jury to an international one. So this is an interesting bit of advice for me to give, which hasn't always been the case. It's very direct. Hasn't always been the case for the advice that I give. But here's my thinking. The quality, the variety, and the judgment at MESC is of a good standard now, as well as the production, that going forward there isn't much wrong at all with how MESC is run. Not anymore, anyway. I'd like a bit more diversity in terms of the fact that it seems to be the same artists consistently, but that's not a problem for now. The main flaw I could find in MESC itself was the fact that the jury rallied behind one act and got what it wanted, whereas the televote rallied behind another and didn't get what it wanted. Slightly undemocratic from the jury. In most cases, international juries in national finals tend to have their results a bit more spread out than juries from the nation itself. Now, Malta, to its credit, doesn't limit its jury to just people from Malta. There are international representatives on it. But what I'm advocating for is for it to be entirely made up of people from outside Malta. It would also enable Malta to get a perspective of the kind of entry people internationally want to get from them, a perspective they've perhaps struggled to understand in the past. Moldova. Stop the AI usage. Artificial intelligence is taking over the creative facets of our lives, and that's unacceptable. In Eurovision National Finals, that's most clear with Selectia Națională in Moldova. Time and time again, we saw AI backgrounds in the staging, including Evgeny Avramov and his Tomatoes of Doom. This directly takes a job that a professional artist and/or animator could have done, and wastes the Earth's precious and finite resources to do so, all to just look off anyway. I'm okay with using AI from an information perspective, although the current versions out there are terrible at that at the moment. And I'm sure in the future we can ensure environmentally friendly AI can be made and used. But for creative industries, this has to stop. It cannot do better than a human, and it removes jobs from humans. Montenegro. Keep up the improvement in quality. Montenegro's Monta song kicked off national final season and made this year a very different one for all of us. Usually the fact that a Montenegro or an Albania kicks off the season means the quality is a little on the low side, and we start to feel like this is going to be a bad year in terms of quality for the main contest. Eventually, as the bigger budget countries come in, we realise it's not going to be that bad at all. This year was different because in the early countries, in general, people felt like there was a big improvement, and that this was going to be a very good contest in terms of quality, alleviating the worries we all had after the 5 withdrawals. As we've gotten closer to the main contest, it does appear the quality has sort of levelled off now. But this shows just how good a start we had courtesy of Montenegro. So, well done. Keep it up. Norway. Please go back to the way it was. I'm now pleading with them. Seriously, why does it have to be this way? Norway's national final downsized in 2025 and remained small for 2026. The quality has also dropped significantly, which, given there are fewer acts, speaks to a concern about the entries the producers are choosing. Please, Norway, go back to the 2024 format. Poland. You also need to go back. Poland's national final in 2025 was a real relief from the previous few years, and it finally felt like Poland was getting somewhere in terms of quality of the acts that they send to the main contest. But 2026 was a complete reversal of that, it would seem. Nothing stood out particularly in this show, and even the winner was unimpressive. Portugal. The result is a facade when it comes to the chaos you almost faced. Portugal's national final was marred by Israel's participation in the main contest. 13 of the 16 acts said they'd refuse to participate in the main contest over it if they won the national final. This created a real dilemma for RTP, and they decided that in the interest of political freedom of expression and the fact that their national final is very much made for the Portuguese audience and not the international one anyway, that all those acts could take part, and they'd probably just take whichever of the ones that agreed to go placed highest. Luckily for them, one of the 2 acts that officially confirmed they'd go, as one other never revealed their preference, won the national final, so they didn't need to go looking for someone else. However, the other one came 7th. This was so almost a crisis, because if you send acts that came 7th in your own country, how on earth are you going to expect that to fly in the rest of the world? It's a difficult dilemma because, of course, they made the right decision in terms of freedom of expression, an important factor in music, but it nearly ended up costing them a hell of a lot. One also wonders if seeing the impact that Israel's participation had on their own show might make RTP rethink its decision not to put as much pressure as they could have done on the EBU to reconsider Israel's participation. Romania. Add a public vote to your national final and put it on a weekend primetime. Romania's return to Eurovision was a mixed message of whether or not they were totally committed to the concept. They were committed enough to have a national final, but not committed enough to put it in a weekend time slot, and not committed enough to give the public a say in which act wins the national final, rendering the whole thing a bit pointless. I commend the jury for choosing an agreeable winner, and I think most of the fandom does agree on that point. However, the public should have had a say, and you'd have gotten a lot higher viewership if you'd put it on a Saturday night like the other national finals. Wednesday was a very weird choice. Oh, also before I forget, fewer hosts. 7 was way too many, even if they had specific different roles. San Marino. Why, oh why did you do that? San Marino's national final is the only one where I can excuse the idea of it being all jury, mainly because San Marino's population is very small. But the jury still has to select the right acts when it comes down to it. This year they absolutely did not do that. The stir over Boy George was something, in my opinion, they should have resisted, and it's very much looking like they regret not resisting it now. Boy George has responded very badly on social media to a lot of the criticism over his selection, alongside 4th-time San Marino representative Sanit, most of it relating to his previous conviction for assault. One of his recent posts on the site, formerly known as Twitter, reads, and I quote, "Assault, not sexual. Get your facts right. Moron." Viewer, he was convicted for assault for handcuffing a male escort to a wall in his London flat. I don't think that correction is quite hitting the point. I'm not against him being in the contest if he has been reformed since then, and it was 17 years ago. But the social media uproar since, and his response to it, does seem concerning. Serbia. Why did it look like it was for Eurovision 1972? Serbia's national final, Pesma za Euroviziju, came with an interesting aesthetic design. I don't even quite know whether or not to call it dated, given it was as far back as over 50 years. Pretty much everything else about this national final was decent, especially in the context of the political struggles that Serbia has had for over a year now. But yeah, maybe bring the design 50 years forward next time. That was just weird. Spain. Don't be afraid to stay out. Spain's national final, Benidorm Fest, was a huge success despite them withdrawing from Eurovision, and it showed that they very much can survive without the main contest. So my main message is that they don't need to abandon their principles. If Israel remain in the contest in 2027, stay out and hold Benidorm Fest again. It has very much worked, and the viewership should return as well as fears are alleviated. Sweden. Change nothing. Sweden's Melodifestivalen are highly unlikely to change anything anyway. But please, don't change a thing. This was a very good Melodifestivalen. In previous years, I have struggled to watch that show because of the over-reliance on an industry that has gone stale and boring for many of us. In the last 2 years, that has changed massively, and the variety is amazing. It's reached the point where it isn't taking itself too seriously, which it was doing before, but is still retaining the level of production quality that it's had from the very beginning. We know from the previous 3 times they've done it that Sweden knows how to host, and now that's being applied to Melfest, the sky is the limit. Ukraine. Careful of the publicity pre-contest. Ukraine's national final Vidbir was yet again a huge success in 2026, despite being held in a bunker in an undisclosed location. The production quality was amazing, and the song quality was the same. However, one thing slightly spoiled the result, which is that it was very clear that people were voting tactically based on the press framing of how the contest was going to go. People viewed the religious undertones of Jerry Heil's song as slightly out of touch, given that they're currently finding it very hard to believe that there is a God when their homes are constantly being destroyed by Russia over the last 4 years. This led to this effect of people who were originally going to vote for Monokate, or Katerina Pavlenko from Go A as most of us know her, instead voting for eventual winner Lelika, as she had the best chance of beating Jerry Hale. This isn't anything against Jerry, she's an amazing artist and she's entitled to her views, but more the press reaction and framing of it as Lelika against Jerry ignores the other 8 amazing artists and their songs and kind of ruined the result. So just be wary of that in future years and try to discourage that. This isn't a political election. Tactical voting should not be necessary. So that's it, everyone. My advice for next year has been given out to the 24 national final countries, ignoring the obvious one I don't want to talk about. Next week will be my last video as CFS Eurovision, where I'll be going through my plans for the immediate future, but I will return to Eurovision after the main contest to give advice to the countries that internally selected their acts, and I will hopefully be covering Junior Eurovision this time as well later in the year. I didn't last year because I was concerned over the political situation in Georgia where it was hosted, so I'm excited to go back to that as I've been watching it the last few years. But this channel will be changing its output in between. I'm not going anywhere though, so I can promise that. Until next week, I shall thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.